Hey, welcome back. It's puppet show time. Hey, Sue. Hey, Charles. I love your shirt. Do you? A friend of mine gave it to me. Oh, I bet it was a nice friend. A kind friend. A generous friend. I bet you love her. Yes, I do. Andrew's going to get jealous. Andrew needs to find his own bestie. I think so. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I thought the first thing we would talk about is our fun Australia facts, and then we'll get down to business. Oh, good. I love fun Australia facts. Well, then, hang on, and we'll get into it. All right, how about some Australia fun place names? Humpy Bong. Think about that one for a while. I mean, that just plays out on so many different levels. Yorkie's Knob. Now, I've often said that I really don't think we are speaking the same language. Words do not mean the same thing in the US as they mean in Australia. Here, a Yorkie is a fluffy little dog that women carry around in their handbags. I think Reese Witherspoon carried around a little Yorkie in Legally Blonde. Yeah, it's that sort of thing. Knob needs no explanation. So, also there's a 2 mile knob, which is a downright scary concept. But somebody needs to tell them what knob means to us. It's not going to be me. So, any volunteers? How about my very favorite Australian place name? And this one is just so bizarre that nowhere but Australia could this happen. It's St. Kilda. Now, St. Kilda is a suburb of Melbourne, and I became acquainted with St. Kilda through Kerry Greenwood's Franny Fisher mysteries. And I actually rather enjoy the Franny Fisher mysteries, except I have to say, in the last couple of books, the sex has just gotten, well, it's gotten so kinky, even I can't handle it, which is absolutely saying something, because I got handcuffs on my bed. How strange do you have to be before you just freak me out? But yeah, she's starting to freak me out. Anyway, back to St. Kilda. St. Kilda is not a saint. There is no St. Kilda. So the suburb of Melbourne is not named after a saint. It's actually named after a boat. So, suburb named after boat, okay, that's strange. The boat was called the Lady of St. Kilda, which you might think means it was named after a saint, given the fact that all these saints are Our Lady of this and Our Lady of that and Our Lady of Lord only knows what, perhaps quite literally. But no, this is not about a saint either. The boat, the Lady of St. Kilda, was named after a Scottish noblewoman from the early 18th century who learned about a plot to overthrow the king. It was a Jacobite revolution. They were Scots. Scots are always trying to kill someone. It's just what they do. It's like assassination is their national pastime. In fact, they used to create assassination pacts. When a group of Scottish noblemen got together and decided they were going to kill somebody, usually somebody important, they would write it all up and they would all sign their names to it. That was called an assassination pact. Today, we call it an inexplicable voluntary confession to attempted murder. For them, no, it was just their thing. It's what they did. The Scots are really not like the rest of us. So she finds out about the plot, and they decide, for some reason, they're willing to kill the king, but they're not willing to kill her. Again, Scots, they defy explanation. Instead, they imprison her in an area of Scotland on the coast known as St. Kilda. Now, this area of Scotland is not named after the saint either, because again, there is no St. Kilda. I cannot stress this strongly enough, because a great many things are named after this non-existent saint. They're not really sure how the name St. Kilda came about. In my opinion, and I've read all the theories, in my opinion, the most likely version is that it was from the Norse word for shield, which is something along the lines of skilda. And there was a speck on the map between the S and the K, and someone thought it was S period Kilda, which would have been Saint Kilda instead of Skilda, which would have meant shield, which in fact would have made sense given the way the Norse named places. They're as strange as the Scots in their own way. So here we have this bizarre chain of events. We have a map mistake that results in a non-saint named Kilda, a woman who uncovers a revolutionary plot who is imprisoned there, and a boat is named after the woman. The boat arrives in Australia. The Australians name their little suburb after the boat. No saint at all involved. One of the most bizarre and circuitous connections I have ever come across. But yeah, the Scots are not like us, boy, neither are the Australians. When they start naming places, there's just no telling what they're going to come up with. So that's it. St. Kilda. And that, by the way, is an absolutely true story. That is how St. Kilda became named St. Kilda. No saint involved, just some Scots, some revolutions, an assassination pact, an imprisoned woman, a boat, only in Australia. When we come back, we are going to talk about our Etsy shop reviews, because remember we were reviewing the 3 Etsy shops, and we're going to talk about pottery and break it down into some manageable categories and at least get some determination of how pottery is classified. So we'll be right back. We'll see you in a minute. Well, we have a lot of stuff to get to today, so let's get to it. Now, the winner of our Steampunk Bakelite voltage meter lamp, if you will recall, was a woman named Paula Claus, and I had said, oh no, this has to be Klaus. But when I first saw it, I thought, Mrs. Santa has won. Well, it turns out I wasn't that far wrong. The family name is, in fact, Claus, and she tells me that her husband's license plate does say Santa. So yes, our steampunk lamp is happily off at the North Pole in Santa's workshop. Picture. And widening out that picture so you get a chance to see who else is in the room, turns out the Clauses have a beautiful black cat, and I just couldn't resist throwing him into the picture too. All right, so you know what that means, of course. That means we are currently without a giveaway, and that just breaks my heart, so we're going to have to do something about that today. All right, first thing on the agenda. We looked at 3 Etsy shops last week. SND Antiques Boutique, Foxtail Collectibles, and Diamond Zone 0808. And we got a lot of really interesting and useful input. And I hope all of you did the same thing that I did, which was take a look at that input and then go scurry right along over to your own Etsy shops and see how many of those feedback suggestions you could incorporate. One of the things I did very quickly was added listings. The first of our shops, SND Antiques Boutique, and I'm going to show you some pictures of that. That shop Got some very positive feedback from our viewers. People loved the banner. Some people were not okay about the cat picture. They said they would rather see a picture of the shop owner. Other people said, oh, I love the cat. So, I mean, I'm thinking tomato, tomato. Some people are going to be happy with it. Some people are not. But I think everybody enjoyed the banner. This shop had a limited selection, and that was probably the number one issue that most people took with the shop. They wanted to see more. They liked what they saw, however, so more would be better. Now, the shop hasn't been open long, so I am assuming that our shop owner is still moving merchandise in, which is a good thing. Some of our viewers had said there was some glare in the photos, so that's something we can all learn from. Let's take a good look at our photographs, make sure they are glare free. And people also said that they would like to see better close-ups, particularly of defects in the products. In other words, if you say there's a chip, show the chip, make a point of that. And I think that's good advice for all of us. I think someone else really put it very well when they said, if I'm going to pay $100 for something, I want to see a good picture. I want to read a good description, which brought up another point. Some people felt that the descriptions were a little minimal, and minimal is good. I've got nothing against minimal. In general, not a bad policy. Usually less is more. And in fact, looking at the descriptions in the other shops, other people had said, gee, we don't need all the verbiage. We just need to know what it is. But when you're selling antique goods, particularly, not vintage so much, but antique goods, for example, there was a coal scuttle in that shop. Most of us just don't know what a coal scuttle is. We have some vague notion that people once upon a time used coal, but it didn't happen in our lifetimes, so we're not quite sure how they did it. And if they had a little scuttle, we are not sure whether or not this was actually holding coal or scuttling around the house chasing mice. So if you have an interesting product like a coal scuttle, it's probably wise to give a little bit of a description, what it is, and what you could use it for now. I can give you an example of that from an item I posted on my own shop a couple of weeks ago. It was a vintage rose medallion ashtray. Well, everyone knows what an ashtray is. It's just that an ashtray is no longer something that's really socially acceptable in anyone's home. So people are looking for alternative uses for ashtrays. In this case, I took the advice of some of our artistically minded viewers who said, I use ashtrays to hold paintbrushes. Oh, that's great. So I just came up with a list of things. What do you do with it? I use them to hold chopsticks. I think they're good pet food dishes. Just whatever comes to mind, to give people some options and let them know how they can use your antique items in their modern setting. For a coal scuttle, depending on the size, I'd throw balls of yarn in it. I'd put magazines in it. I'd find some way to translate this largely 19th century piece into the 21st century. But overall, that was a really well-received shop. They all were, of course. And the biggest problem people found with it was they wanted more. So that's always a good thing. The next shop was Foxtail Collectibles. And everybody was very taken with this one. So let me get you a picture of that. The products are bright and shiny and clean, and people felt overall that the prices were reasonable and the pieces were nice, certainly worth buying. There were some interesting critiques, though, things that I felt were not, they were not things that would have kept me up at night, but they were irritating to some of our viewers. And this is a good thing to know. If something is a little irritating to a viewer and it's an easy fix, then by all means, let's get in and fix it. And some of those things were the backgrounds. Many of the items in the shop were photographed on decorative napkins and placemats. And a lot of our viewers had said the wrinkles were distracting. So that's a super quick fix. Grab an iron, bang, wrinkles gone, everybody's happy. But again, the biggest criticism of this shop was not enough stuff. So that's always a good sign. If people say we want more, it means they like what you're offering. So again, really good. The feedback was terrific. And of course, I scurried off and began typing up listings. And as I say, I hope you will all do that. I hope you will all take advantage of these critiques and look at your own shops through the eyes of the rest of our viewers who are potential buyers and say, gee, if they wanted more stuff in that shop, I bet they want more stuff in my shop too, and respond accordingly. And our final shop was Diamond Zone 0808. And this was the one shop that everybody felt had a good variety of products, and a lot of them. And this seller had, I believe, 39 listings. So 39, I'm looking at 30 to 40 being a target number for most potential buyers, because our buyers seem to be satisfied with that when they look to see, what would I buy here? With this shop, I think the biggest problem was there was some confusion about the name. And we went through that when we initially discussed opening our Etsy shop. Remember, I said you can call it Sing a Song for Satan. Nobody really cares as long as people will remember it and they can spell it correctly. And they had some concerns because they went to something called Diamond Zone, and a lot of people initially misspelt it, putting that second D in and turning it into Diamond Zone, but it's Diamond Zone. And then they got another title in the banner. And I think a lot of people had wondered if they had actually gotten to the right shop. So there was some confusion about that. This shop had plenty of items. Most people found the items very engaging. Some of the interesting input, because the owner of this shop actually creates her own items. We had viewers saying, I would like to see a picture of her actually making these things. And I think maybe they wanted to feel a little more engaged with the owner in her creative process, which again is really positive. That's what I call juicy feedback. I want to watch you make this. There were some issues. Some of the pictures seemed to be cropped off a little so that people couldn't actually see the entire item, at least not in the primary photo. That's the one that Etsy calls the thumbnail photo. And I'm sure you'll recall when I said when you're taking your photos, make sure you get at least one that has a lot of background space that you can crop out, because Etsy does crop your photos when they put it into the thumbnail. So you want at least one with extra space so that you can control the cropping. Someone also said that the featured items, and the seller uses the featured items section, that two of the featured items were almost identical, and they would have liked to have seen something else from her shop, because she has many, many other things, something else that showed off more of the broad scope of her wares. And I thought that was an extremely good suggestion, because again, that's a fast fix, and people who want to see more of your stuff means they're engaged, means they're looking. So let me show you a picture of that too. And we had an unusually enterprising viewer. And if I had to say there was a top comment in all of this, this was the top comment. Our unusually enterprising viewer went into the shop's completed sales, items that had been sold, and said, "What has Diamond Zone 0808 sold in the past?" And she discovered there were 7 sales, and 5 of them were polymer animals, 4 of them were polymer bunnies. And she said, "Well, that's what's selling." And then she looked through the contents of the shop and said, "Gee, there are no polymer bunnies." So I thought that was an excellent point to pass on to the shop owner. Obviously, people love your bunnies. It would probably be a really good idea to give them a few more of those. But congrats and kudos to that viewer who actually went the extra step and said, "How can I find what she's sold?" and give her a little cue as to what will sell again. So thank you all so very much. And again, shoot us a note. You want your shop to be reviewed? Next week, we're going to set up 3 more shops, take a look at them, do the same process over again, and we'll see if we can't get some good traffic going through your shops, looking at your stuff, giving you their opinions about what they like, what they think might stand a little tweaking. And of course, as I say, I'm going to use it and just say, what can I learn from this? And I hope all the rest of you do the same. If somebody says, there were 7 or 8 items in the shop and I'd like to see more, and you, like me, had 7 or 8 items in the shop, boy, get back in there listing, because that is what I did. And hopefully this will continue to be something positive and that we can grow together. So, fabulous job, everyone. Now, our main discussion today, as you can see, I am surrounded by pottery. And we've had questions about what are the different kinds of porcelain? What are the different kinds of earthenware? Well, what they are collectively is pottery. All of them are pottery. And we're going to start off with this, because this is probably the most basic kind of pottery you're ever going to see. This particular piece is slab construction from clay. It's considered earthenware because the clay is just pulled out of the ground, sifted through, soaked with water until it's a nice malleable ooze, and then shaped into something. In the case of this piece, this was rolled out into a slab. This is called slab construction. A little circle of clay was cut out. The slab was wrapped around, and as you can see, here's our wrap point. And there is a glaze. This is actually a Lenten Glaze. This is a glaze that could have easily been used 500 years ago. The rest of the construction goes back, get this, 30,000 years. Let me say that again. 30,000 years. This is one of the earliest human creations. Once this piece was formed, it wasn't fired in a kiln. It was fired in a trash can full of sawdust and newspaper. Now you're probably wondering how I know all this. I made this in college. And I did it specifically because I wanted to work with really, really old techniques. Techniques that were almost Neanderthal. This is one of the oldest types of pottery you could come up with. And The black marks on it, because this is not glazed on the outside, the black marks are from the sawdust from the trash can. And I would not have been allowed to do that by myself, by the way. The college had a real problem with undergrads and fire. I'm sure something happened. Nobody ever told me what. But I was fortunate a grad student sort of took me under her wing, and she shoved a whole bunch of flammable stuff into a trash can. We lit it on fire, and this is what came out. And this is what it is today. The oldest sort of pottery, very basic earthenware. This piece, if you'll notice, this is the same sort of construction. It's slab construction. In this case, I can see from the seam that they did not wrap their slab of clay around the circle. They sort of set it on top. That's not what I did. They glazed the whole thing, used a transfer pattern, which that could have been done, I don't know, 200 years ago. Remarkably basic. I flatter myself it looks rather primitive compared to my elegant piece, but hey, we can't all be geniuses. Anyway, very similar handmade piece. Oh, I didn't show you that. Let's see if I can get this. There you go. Those are my initials on the bottom. This was somebody named, whose name began with DW. Handmade piece, very primitive. That's what appeals to me about this. This is not earthenware, though. This is a porcelain clay. Mine, this is the clay. There is nothing on it. This is exactly what it looks like. Looks like a terracotta pot. That is a clay. Earthenware is fired at low temperatures, and it is porous. And that's how you pretty much define earthenware, by the temperature at which it's fired and the porousness or porosity of the clay. The next thing we're going to get into is stoneware. This is stoneware. This comes from a company called Zanesville Pottery, and they were famous for their stoneware. In fact, I think they may still, no, I don't know if they're still in business. I have to correct myself. I'm not sure about that. Stoneware pottery. This is not porous. Now, this is glazed, but it's fired at a higher temperature. And when I say this is porous, if you pour water on this, it won't go through on the inside because the inside is glazed, but it'll soak right through the outside. It's like a terracotta pot. If you fill it with water, the water will eventually just ooze out. This is not water permeable. This is stoneware, which is our next level up. It's fired at higher temperatures, and it is usually considered rustic pottery. Earthenware is considered primitive pottery. This is sort of rustic. This is folk pottery, pottery that's useful as opposed to decorative. Although I have to say, I find a lot of stoneware pottery extremely decorative. This is also stoneware. Usually you can tell the type of pottery it is when you take a look at the naked pottery, which is usually this rim. And this rim sat on the pallet in the kiln, and consequently it's not glazed, and you can see the clay through it. So, stoneware. Finally, we come to porcelain. Now, this is a rose medallion piece. This has the Made in China mark, and I think we've discussed this already. If we haven't, that means it was made between 1919 and 1949. It had very specific markings, and you can use them to date a piece. This is fabulous. If you hold this up to the light and pass your hand behind it, you can actually see your fingers through the piece. Extremely fine. Fine porcelain. This is fired at really high temperatures. Also, there are different clays used. Now, this is just red clay. Porcelain has different materials in it. Kaolin, which actually is, I know that doesn't sound Chinese. I believe it was called Gaoling in Chinese, and sort of westernized into kaolin, which is a mineral that they used in the clay. And different clays have different compositions. So porcelain clay is different from this sort of terracotta clay. You can get much more delicate pieces out of it. But again, with this, we're talking about something that is not all that different from what you would have seen 30,000 years ago. This sort of fine porcelain is relatively recent. Even in China, it's relatively recent. Probably about 1,500 years ago, they were able to come up with nice porcelain. And mind you, the Chinese were about 1,000 years ahead of the West. So this is nice. And I just want to pull this out because I want to talk about glazes too. This is the only piece here, this one, that was not glazed. The interior was glazed. I did that to make it waterproof. But the rest of these have, it's a paint, really, that is fired at high temperature and becomes glassy. It's actually chemically changed in the heat. And you can see things like in this. This glaze has taken on a sort of metallic sheen. I don't know if that's raku. It might be. It has the characteristics of raku, which is very metallic. We tend to categorize pottery these days more by the glazes, the colors, things like that. But that is for another video. What we've got here and now is a basic understanding of pottery from the oldest, earliest, most primitive through the utilitarian, which is the stoneware, up through the porcelain, which is the fine china. And these three categories are, this is basically how you categorize it. Anything you see around you is probably going to fit into one of these three categories. So that is our 50 cents worth of pottery for today. Now, we have one more thing we need to deal with, because I said there were 4 things. Well, if I didn't say there were 4 things, there are 4 things. As I said before, we don't have an active giveaway. So we got to change that. This is going to be a quickie giveaway. I'm going to show you something. These were sent in by one of our viewers, Desert Dragonworks, and that is her Facebook and her Etsy store name, and I'm going to put that into the information below the video. And among other things, she has made these beautiful pens. So this, or these, are our quickie giveaways. What I like about these pens, besides the fact that they are really pretty and really interesting and write really well, is they're thick. And as many of us who are getting older discover, thicker pens are a lot easier to hang on to than thinner pens, especially if you're starting to get a little arthritis in your fingers. I'm very lucky that hasn't happened yet, knock wood, because it would definitely interfere with my lamp making, but they've also got nice ridges. So these are great pens if you're having any mobility issues. So we have 4 pens here, and Lisa from Desert Dragonworks had sent 5. The 5th pen is off with the crazy lamp lady. I made sure she got one. So she's very pleased with it. So our contest on this video in the comments. Now remember, the rules are you subscribe, you like the video, and it's probably a good idea to hit the notification bell so that when I tell you you're the winner, you're going to know and you're going to be able to get back to me so I can make sure you get your pen. Just let me know why you would like the pens. And we've got 4 pens, so we're going to have 4 winners. This one has a little angel on it. This one, little beads. This one has a dragonfly. This one is cute little crystals. And I will put up a picture of all 4 pens so you can see how pretty they are, because I know from a distance you're really missing a lot of the attractiveness of this. And Lisa from Desert Dragonworks makes these pens herself, which is fabulous, and she has shared them with us, which is even more fabulous. So, new giveaway. Tell me why you like the pens, and everybody have a great day. I will catch you again tomorrow, and tomorrow we are going to talk about steampunk and goth. Is there an overlap? If there is, what is it? How do you tell them apart? And we're going to talk about fans. And perhaps you will recall a while back, I pulled a fan out of a box and said, this is fan, and this fan is worth $500, as opposed to another fan that might be worth $10. Well, we're going to do fans tomorrow, and I'm going to show you how to identify those $500 fans, because they are still out there. They can still be had. I just bought one on eBay last week, and I paid, I think, $14 including shipping. So stick around tomorrow. I will show you how you can do the same thing. Okay, have a great day, everyone.